Start this while we're recording. I don't know if I told you, Justine, when I was in Brazil in November, someone gave me a very interesting tip about Carlos Diegues, the 1999 film, and about Caetano Veloso, the guitarist. Tropicalia is his style of music. But someone gave me an interesting tip about why Caetano Veloso so endorsed Diegues' project while at the same time saying he hated the Camus film. Do you want to know why?
Right?
Caetano Veloso's wife is the producer of Diegues' 1999 film. Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
these are
Yes.
things you can only learn on the ground. You have to be in Brazil. You have to be in the
Yeah.
country. You have to be on the ground to hear these kinds of stories. Anyway,
Yeah.
your next question I think was about candomblé, but can you or the Afro-descent practices? Can you ask that question? I don't have the question in front of me.
Yeah. Now,
Yes, yes, I'm ready. I'm recording. Are you there?
yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you ask your question?
Hello? I, yeah, I was. How does the Afro-Brazilian ritual Macumba work in the context of the film?
Okay, so Justina's asked a question, and I'm going to phrase it exactly the way she asked it because I've learned something on this last trip to Brazil. She asks, how does the Afro-descent ritual of Macumba play into the movie, the Camus movie? So what we're talking about here primarily is the underworld scene in which Orpheus is brought into this bureau, this federal building, and he looks down this staircase and he's led by the janitor into an underworld, a subculture of Afro descent practice. Justine and I have talked about this, and I've told her that it's Macumba is the practice because the movie's of course set in Rio de Janeiro, and my understanding was Macumba was the Afro descent practice there. I've later on this recent trip learned that it's actually Umbanda. Let me set this up. So the idea is that there are retentions of African practices that slave populations hand down from generation to generation. One that I know is candomblé, and I'm gonna set Justine up with a candomblé video from a ritual that I attended to one of the orishas. Candomblé is an Afro descent practice in which ancestors embody the worshiper, takes on the body and the life of the worshiper, and the worshiper reenacts scenes of mythology regarding these deities. So, what you're going to see is a ritual in which I forgot which, I think it's Ogum, but one of the female deities is worshipped in this video that you're seeing. Umbanda is interesting because it is particularly syncretistic. In other words, what the slave populations were able to do is to mix their own orishas or the deities with Christian deities. So, for example, I was told that my orisha is Omolu, and Omolu is a god of healing and sickness. He's covered in this kind of straw. He said the story goes that he covers himself because he's got pox all over him. He's the god of sickness and healing. Well, in Christian tradition, he is Saint Lazarus. And as you know, Justine, from your own work, Saint Lazarus is the beggar, always surrounded by dogs who lick his wounds and heal him. Lazarus, of course, god of sickness and healing as well. In the Umbanda ritual, you have, again, the worship of the Orishas disguised in Christian practice. Now, what you're seeing in the Camus film is not quite at all disguised, is it? But you'll look at the scene again and you'll see this image of a black man with a beard. It's a kind of little statuette. He is called the Preto Velho, the old black man, the wise black man who was the slave, grade, symbol of wisdom, symbol of the embodiment and the handing down of these Afro-descent practices. He's the memory, he's the cultural memory, and he's there on the mantle in that scene. So Orpheus is brought into this underworld. The black people in this underworld are worshiping, they're inhabited by the ancestors, and in that practice, he hears the voice of Eurydice, he turns around, and he loses Eurydice forever. Now, this can mean so many things. Is this a way of saying that Orpheus has kind of rejected the Afro-descent practice, that he doesn't know what's going on, that he doesn't believe or accept that ancestors can embody us? It's hard to say exactly what Giegis is doing with this scene, but it's interesting that this scene is juxtaposed with Orpheus looking for Eurydice in this federal building, again, where records are kept, records of those who've died, records of marriage, records of people's lives, and he's told, this is this is a place of the dead. These are papers, and the papers are scattered all over the place, right? And he's told, you can't find her here. You have to find her where the living is. So this is a kind of interesting juxtaposition between the text and living practice, the dead and the living, the idea that myth is recorded in writing as well, right? That the paper represents the story, the myth itself, and yet that's dead. This comes to a later question you'll ask about reception of classics, right? The paper is dead, but what's alive is this receptacle, this vehicle of reception. In this case, Afro-descent practices where Eurydice, an ancestor, does live. Ancestors always live; they never die in this practice. So this is a way of viewing that scene. This question of candomblé, umbanda. I was told that macumba is the Rio, the local manifestation of this practice in Rio de Janeiro, which is where the movie is set. But generally speaking, we're talking about Afro-descent practices broadly all over Brazil. Did you want to leave it there?